Let's talk about one of the most uncomfortable but most common deal breakers in relationships, which is money. Not just who makes more money, but what happens when one person starts carrying everything, the bills, the chores, the emotional weight of being the adult. Because when one person stops trying, then the other person starts overfunctioning. And then love slowly starts to feel like labor. So these stories that I'm going to share with you today, they're not about the dollars. They're about respect. They're about the quiet resentment that builds when you feel like you're doing life alone. So let's start with the first one. I, 40-year-old female, own my own home, and 36-year-old male moved in with me. He thinks he doesn't have to pay rent since I paid for everything before he moved in anyway. Am I being fair by insisting he gets a job and pay rent despite him feeling mentally ready for a job? The title alone, that's already a kicker, okay? He says, I paid everything on my own home before he moved in anyway, and it's not like heating the house cost an extra or anything. He contributes somewhat to groceries, but he eats way more than me. I say that he adds to electric, water, wear and tear, and he feels like it's minimal and it shouldn't even matter. He's stressed and trying to get to a better place before job hunting. I agreed to supporting him for a few months. Yes, it was a legit reason to not work. But those few months have been well over a year, and my patience and niceness has worn off. He feels like he's helping around the house should be enough. He feels it's okay to lay in bed until 11 when I start to work at 7:30 a.m. He also gets upset and says I'm controlling when I suggest him getting up at 8 a.m. to do a set amount of hours, house cleaning, and house projects. When I bring it up, he either gets defensive and a fight pursues, or he says things to play the victim. I sure wish I had the ability to get a job like you. I tell him you do. You need to work for it. Or he says something like, I feel unappreciated for all the work I do around here. You don't understand how much I do, and it's hurtful. He does what a normal person that pays rent and works should. I told him during an argument that he does barely over the minimum standard of what is expected for a grown adult that works 40 hours a week. We have discussed household work expectations, and when I try to enforce it, he finds a way to blame it on something other than laziness. He cannot hold himself accountable. I feel like this is a complete manipulation, gaslighting BS. He has never lived independently, always with a girlfriend or roommate. I bring this up to other people and everyone tells me that he's probably just feels ashamed, or I bet he's just depressed. And that is why he's making excuses. I say that he could get a job, not lay in bed so long, not watch movies when I tell him I need to help cleaning, and to grow up. I say I feel like he's gaslighting and being a manipulator, and I get told that I'm being dramatic. So, Reddit, is there something I'm missing? Could he possibly actually feel that me having him pay rent via money or labor is bad? Or is it gaslighting and me being dramatic? P.S. We discussed this in couples therapy 6 months ago, and it went nowhere other than him wanting to quit therapy. I'm adding the fact that when we first started dating, he did have a job. It was a seasonal job, and it was assumed that he would go back. Then things happened, and he didn't go back. He was taking some time off. He did very minimum side jobs for cash here and there, 1 or 2 a month to pay for food and gas. Okay, and then the Reddit poster went on to add an update, and she stated that, so I realized that unintentional gaslighting can be a thing, but either way, it's still manipulation. I was just trying to figure out if he was purposely or accidentally being the D-bag hobosexual he's claiming to be, a narcissistic turd, or just an inept man-child. BTW, never heard of the word hobosexual before this, and I love it. I've never heard of that either until this Reddit post, so... And for everyone saying that I'm ridiculous for allowing this for so long, yes, I have been. But it hasn't been an issue until recently because he was very helpful in getting man stuff done around the house. I don't pay any of his bills. He just doesn't pay any of mine. My friends, W2F, thank you Redditors for the overwhelming validation that they are toxic. Last night I said, hey, BTW, I'm going to have you pay the electric bill from now on, or you will live like an Amish person and you'll need a job because you will start paying more each month, or I will start bringing stuff to your mom's house. Thanks, love ya. He grumbled a little, but didn't argue. Okay, let's jump into this because girl, no, you're not dramatic. You're just done. And that's different. You're sitting there thinking, am I crazy for wanting my grown partner to get up before noon and to pay rent? Meanwhile, this man has built a tiny kingdom of excuses in your guest room. Let's call it what it is. He's living the dream. Free rent, free utilities, and a woman that feels guilty for asking for basic contribution. He's got a full service life with an emotional concierge. By him saying things like, you were already paying before I moved in, logic, that's like saying you already had a car before I got in it, so I shouldn't have to pay any gas. Make it make sense, please. The part that gets me though is him turning the care into control. You ask for teamwork, he calls it nagging. You ask for effort, he calls it stress. You ask for accountability, and suddenly he's a victim of his own potential. Girl, no, you have been patient, too patient. You've supported him for over a year, and instead of gratitude, he's offering you guilt and half-washed dishes. You're not being unfair. You're realizing that you're being under-partnered. You know that feeling when someone keeps promising you to get it together soon, and you start to realize soon has quietly become your lifestyle? That's where you're at right there. This isn't love mixed with struggle. This is struggle that's dressed up like love. So let me answer your question directly. Am I being unfair for expecting him to pay rent and to work? The answer is no. You're being realistic. Here's what's actually happening. Beneath the surface, you probably have an anxious, secure, hybrid attachment. The kind that believes, if I keep everything together, the relationship won't fall apart. You equate stability with sacrifice. So you keep giving and you keep hoping it will inspire a reciprocated type of relationship. But all it does is teach him that you'll hold the weight for both of you. And for him, he shows more of an avoidant and dependent patterns. Avoidant because he minimizes responsibility, and dependent because he can't self-sustain. He's learned that comfort is safer than effort. So he attaches through dependence instead of contribution. And every time he feels shame, he flips it, calls you controlling or dramatic, so he doesn't have to face himself. And people who have never learned accountability often interpret structure as threat. If he's never lived alone, never self-funded his comfort, he's emotionally still a teenager functioning off whoever nurtures him next. So when you ask him to grow, he experiences it as rejection instead of responsibility. And it could be depression, possibly, but depression doesn't justify entitlement. It explains why he feels unmotivated, but it doesn't excuse refusing contribution. If someone's too depressed to work, they should seek help, not transfer the labor onto someone like you. So this dynamic has quietly turned from partnership to parenting. You're the functional one, and he's the dependent one. And once that shift happens, intimacy fades because you can't desire someone that you have to constantly rescue. And here's the truth. When you carry both the financial and the emotional load, then love starts to feel like a second job that you never applied for. And that resentment you feel, that's your body saying to you that this is unsustainable. Let's turn to some of the Reddit comments to see what some of the Reddit commenters had to say about this. The first commenter said, he's just ashamed. Give him time. Shame only turns into growth when someone takes action. Time without effort, you're just delaying the inevitable. The second commenter said, maybe he's depressed. Well, if that is true, then the next step is therapy, not Netflix. Depression requires structure, not sheltering. The next commenter wrote, you're being controlling. Control is about domination. Boundaries are about definition. You're defining what partnership means to you. And that right there, that's healthy. The next commenter wrote, at least he helps around the house. Helping with chores isn't a rent payment. It's a basic co-living hygiene. It's expected. whoever lives in the house to help around the house. So you ask if you are missing something, and here's what you're missing. You're missing permission. Permission to accept a reciprocated relationship without apology. Permission to believe that your stability deserves protection, not depletion. And permission to say, if you want to share my space, then you have to share the load. There is nothing wrong with that. Because here's the truth. This isn't about rent money. It's about respect currency. And right now, he's in major debt. So that's what it looks like when one partner drains you by doing nothing. But what happens when the imbalance flips? When the other person is chasing a dream so hard that they stop showing up financially at all. Let's talk about it in this next Reddit story here. My 41-year-old male influencer girlfriend, 34-year-old female, is not making any money. What would you do? My girlfriend has been supporting herself as an influencer, but has not been financially successful for the past 2 years. She had to rent out her condo and move in with me because she could no longer afford her mortgage payments. When she moved in, she said she could make influencing work as a job, but in the first year, she only earned a few $1,000s and only posted twice per month. At the start of this year, I gave her a target of at least one post per week and earning a minimum wage. With only 3 months left of the year, she has made no money and is averaging one post per month despite having plenty of content to work with. I like photography. Conversations about what she does all day do not go well. Lately, she has been saying her happiness and mental health are more important than making money and my arbitrary targets. And when she earned some money renting her condo and we could continue to get by, what really bothers me is her lack of effort, nor does she seem concerned about making money. I gave her the year to try and make it work, but I am confident that she is not going to make her target. I am torn between letting her try until the end of the year or asking her to move out and live with her parents until she finds a job. I take ownership for letting this go on for so long. I enjoy photography and content creation and initially believed that she could be successful given the paid work and free trips. So he's asking essentially, what would you do? Well, let's talk about it. And man, listen, this one hurts because I get it. You start dating someone who's creative, you see their potential, you believe in their spark, you don't mind investing a little because you think we're building something together. 2 years later, no progress, no plan, and you're the only one bringing in income. That's not a dream anymore. That's dependence. And can we just acknowledge the irony? She's an influencer who doesn't actually post. Like, how are you going to influence if you never ever show up? And it's not even like you're asking her to give up on her dream. You're asking for effort because every time she says mental health matters more than money, she's telling you that stress doesn't matter at all. She's prioritizing comfort over contribution, and that gets heavy really fast. You know that feeling that you get when you're watching someone you love just kind of float while you feel like you're sinking? When you're up early and they're still in bed scrolling for content inspiration, that's not resentment out of meanness. It's resentment from exhaustion. And you're probably looking around like, how did I end up the only adult in this house? Because right now you're not a partner, you're a patron. And patrons eventually run out of patience. Now, I'm all in for creative careers. But let's be honest, every dream requires discipline. And if you want to live off of influence, you got to produce something to influence with. So when you set up a simple target, a post a week, and she ignored it, that's not an attack on her mental health. That's her dodging accountability. And the hard truth is that you're in a relationship with someone who's romanticizing the idea of freedom, but depending on your structure to afford it. And that right there, that never works in the long term. And can we just walk through what's happening here for a second? She moved in because the money ran out. Okay, that's understandable. Life, it does happen. But that first year, he's shooting photos, cheering her on, believing this is a building phase. Then month after month, nothing. No brand deals, no steady content schedule, no financial plan. Just, hey, vibes and filter, right? And he's standing there like, did I accidentally become your manager or your landlord? Because right now, he's really both. When he asks what she's been working on, she calls it micromanaging. When he mentions bills, she says mental health. When he sets a reasonable goal, she calls it pressure. It's that pattern where every practical question becomes a personal attack, and you start second guessing yourself like, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should just let her figure it out. But meanwhile, the rent is still due, the lights still cost money, and the groceries still disappear. You know that moment when someone keeps saying, I just need more time, and you realize the only thing changing with time is your savings account? That's what's happening right here. You're tired of watching her talk about creating instead of actually creating. Because when somebody says, I'm protecting my happiness, but their vision of happiness means that you do all the protecting, that's not partnership. That's self-preservation at your expense. And I get it. If you love someone who's lost, you don't have to crush them, but enabling them isn't empathy. Supporting someone means helping them stand, not keeping them on your shoulders forever. So let's shift to a counselor, because essentially what he's asking is, what would you do? And here's the answer. You set a time-bound boundary and you invite her into shared reality. And that's not cruel, that's clarity. Because right now the relationship isn't failing from lack of love. It's failing from lack of accountability. For her, I see this looks like an avoidant dependent behavior. She equates structure with judgment. Somewhere in her story, discipline felt like rejection, maybe from critical parents or partners who measured love by achievement. And now when he mentions goals, it triggers that old shame for her. If I can't perform, I'm not lovable. So to protect herself, she pretends the goal does not matter and calls it mental health. But real healing, it requires honesty. If influence isn't working, that doesn't make her a failure. It makes her human. And the mature move would to be adapt, to get a part-time work, to rebuild confidence, to post consistently again later. And for him, he carries an anxious, secure type of energy. He overfunctions because he fears the relationship will collapse if he stops holding it together. He's turning into the provider, into the parent simultaneously, paying the bills, setting deadlines, monitoring outcomes. That's not a boyfriend's job. That's emotional project management. And when that pattern continues, resentment becomes the new love language. And loss of professional identity often creates paralysis. If she once got validation from likes, sponsorships, and attention, and now the silence of failure feels unbearable. Avoidance becomes a coping mechanism. If I don't try, then I can't fail again. So she stays in comfort, scrolling, dreaming, talking, but not risking another hit to her ego. Meanwhile, he's paying the emotional and financial cost of that comfort. And yes, depression can flatten motivation, but depression recovery still needs movement. It's not an excuse to outsource survival. If she's truly struggling, therapy and daily structure are non-negotiables. And money relationships is never just about math. It's about meaning. Right now, the meaning is broken. He's saying, I need partnership, and she's hearing, you're not enough. And the way forward is to redefine support. And support doesn't mean unlimited sponsorship. Support means I believe in you enough to expect you to participate. So let's ground this in reality. If you keep paying all of the bills while she finds herself, you're not helping her. You're delaying her growth. Every time you rescue her from the consequences of an action, you confirm her belief that effort isn't required for security. So try giving her a loving but firm boundary. You've got 3 months to build structure, income, or a new plan. If not, we'll need to live separately until you can sustain yourself. That's not an ultimatum. That's an invitation back into adulthood. It gives her both clarity and choice. Because you got to remember that healthy love requires mutual contribution, whether it's money, effort, or emotional energy. But both people need skin in the game. If only one person keeps paying, planning, motivating, and soothing, the relationship stops being romantic and it starts being administrative. And nobody falls in love with their administrator. Let's turn it to some of these Reddit comments to see what some of the commenters had to say. One commenter said, "She's just following her passion. Don't crush her creativity." Creativity thrives on consistency. Accountability does not kill passion. It gives direction. Another commenter wrote, "Maybe he's too focused on money." Money is a metaphor here. He's asking for a shared effort, not luxury. Stability is a love language too. Another commenter wrote, "She might be depressed. If that is true, the next step is therapy, routine, and maybe even medication, not avoidance and denial. Depression needs structure, not spectators." Another commenter wrote, "He should just relax. Women take time to build business." Absolutely, but 2 years with no measurable progress and no openness to feedback isn't incubation, it's stagnation. And another commenter wrote, "She'll resent him if he pushes," and another commenter wrote, "She'll resent him if he pushes her." Maybe, but she'll also lose him if he doesn't. Avoiding discomfort won't save this relationship. Honest boundaries might. And the question he's asking is, how do I love her without losing myself? You do it by staying compassionate and clear. You keep loving her, but from a position of equality, not rescue. Love that drains your stability isn't sustainable. Love that holds you both accountable is. If she responds to boundaries with effort, then there's hope. But if she responds with blame, you have your answer. So we've seen what happens when one person stops contributing out of comfort. But what about when money becomes the reason that two people stay, even after love is gone? That's a different kind of emotional debt. So let's turn to that third Reddit story here. "My 30-year-old male wife, 29-year-old female, just told me she doesn't love me anymore and wants to end our relationship, but still live together for financial reasons and for continuity of our 3 young kids. Is that a terrible ideal? I guess we'll see. I'm going to start by apologizing in advance if this doesn't stay fully focused. My wife and I have been together for 10 years, married for 5. We met in college and she has been the love of my life since. 2 days ago, she told me that she doesn't love me anymore and for her happiness wants our relationship to end. I probably should have seen this coming. Our relationship has been rocky since we met, but for whatever reason, I always wanted to make it work. We have 3 kids together, all under the age of 6. They are amazing and so happy and the best thing from our marriage. Financially, my wife is a stay-at-home mom. She owns our house outright from family money. She has no student loans, but also no college degree. I make fairly a decent income and support our family. Since my wife doesn't have a job and no way to pay the bills, she wants me to move into our finished basement and continue to pay utilities and food for us and our kids, in addition to keeping her on my health insurance. She wants to take time to get her degree and file for dissolution afterwards, so she can support herself and our kids. She also wants this for continuity for our kids. While she doesn't love me anymore, she doesn't want me out of our kids' lives, even weekly, and still wants to be friends with me. I'm honestly dying inside right now because as rocky as our relationship has been, I've never loved her less, and she has been all I've ever loved or wanted. I don't know how to proceed or even to feel at this point. I'm terrified because I let my friendships go since we've been married. And while my family will support me, I don't have many friends left. I'm terrified about finances. I'm terrified of not being able to be happy without her. Honestly, I'm so confused about everything going on in my head. On top of that, is it stupid to stay in the house for our own kids? It would be convenient for me financially too, even though if I moved out, we would share custody. I don't have to pay child support this way. It's also better for my taxes. I'm just so lost, I don't know what to think. Sorry for this being a long-winded ramble. So it sounds like the big question that he's asking is it terrible ideal to stay in a house for our kids? Because even though she says she doesn't love him, he still loves her deeply. So that's a great question to ask. What? This one hurts. This one hurts. It's that kind of pain that you can feel even if you've never lived it. The way your chest gets heavy when someone says, I don't love you, but they're still there, brushing past you in the hallway, making breakfast for the same kids, using the same coffee mugs. And I hear you saying that you want to hold on because letting go feels like dying. So you start convincing yourself that proximity is better than absence. That maybe if you stay kind and patient and useful, they'll remember what they felt before. But here's the truth. She's already leaving, just not geographically yet. You're holding on to the ghost of a marriage that already moved downstairs. And I know you think that maybe the kids will be okay if we keep it together for them, but kids don't just watch what you do. They feel what you feel. They'll notice the distance. They'll notice the tension. They'll notice the way that your smile doesn't reach your eyes anymore. You're not protecting them from loss. You're teaching them that love is something you silently grieve while pretending everything is fine. And I get it. You're scared. You gave up your friend circle for the marriage. Your life revolves around the kids. And the thought of coming home to an empty house, it can feel unbearable. But staying in a place where you're unwanted, that hurts more slowly. It just takes longer to die. And sometimes self-respect, it whispers, it doesn't shout. It says, you deserve to be loved out loud again, even if it means starting over in a smaller place with less money, but more peace. And I hear you asking, is it a terrible idea to stay in the house for our kids? And let's answer that honestly. Yes, because it trades short-term convenience for long-term confusion. And here's why. When a relationship ends, but the living arrangement doesn't, you create a limbo. Not lovers, not exes, not roommates. Just two ghosts parenting together. And nobody heals in limbo. You both end up rehearsing heartbreak every single morning at the breakfast table. Now let's look at what's happening underneath. From his side, I see that he's showing this anxious attachment, that fear that if he lets go, he'll lose everything, his kids, his family, his identity. So he clings on to the practical because the emotional is slipping away. He tells himself staying is noble, but really it's surviving of the heart. He's hoping proximity will rekindle love, but proximity without affection, it does not rebuild connection. It just keeps reopening the wound. And for her, I see she's avoidant. She's emotionally checked out, but still tethered to comfort and stability. Leaving feels too hard, too expensive, too disruptive. So she rationalizes it, staying for the kids. But what she's really doing is avoiding the guilt, because walking away from a stable provider makes her the villain in her own story. So instead of facing that, she invents the halfway option. I'll stay physically, but emotionally, I'm gone. And sometimes when someone feels trapped by motherhood, by identity, or by lost dreams, they associate freedom with separation, but they still crave safety. So they try to have both freedom and financial cushion. And that right there is why she wants him in the basement, still paying the bills, still nearby, but without the emotional responsibility of being his partner. It's the illusion of independence funded by someone else's heartbreak. And for him, this setup risks sliding into depression or emotional burnout. He's constantly questioning his worth. If I'm good enough to pay the bills, why am I not good enough to be loved? And for her, staying will actually delay self-work that she needs to do. She won't rebuild the identity while someone else cushions every consequence. Separation with support from afar is healthier than living in silent resentment under one roof. So staying for the kids, it doesn't protect them. What it does is it teaches them that love is endurance, not intimacy. They'll grow up thinking that quiet misery equals stability. Real stability is two healthy parents, even if they live in different homes. And if you must co-parent, do it with clarity, separate spaces, defined roles, emotional honesty. Otherwise, the house becomes a museum, a perfect display of everything that used to be alive. So no, it's not a terrible ideal because you're weak. It's a terrible ideal because it keeps you stuck. Healing, it needs distance. And distance creates perspective. Perspective, it gives you back your dignity. And you deserve that. Let's turn to some of the Reddit comments and see what some of the commenters had to say. One commenter said, it's not about the kids. It's about her comfort. And yeah, that's exactly right. People will often use noble reasons to disguise emotional avoidance. If it were truly about the kids, she would prioritize a home environment where both parents are emotionally regulated, not resentful roommates. Another commenter wrote, this arrangement will ruin you. Move out before she breaks you. And that's pretty blunt there, but there's truth there. When someone asks you to stay as a financial safety net, they're no longer offering partnership. They're offering a transaction. And if you accept that, you'll start confusing usefulness with worth. Let's see what other commenters had to say. Maybe she's just lost and doesn't know what she wants. That's likely true, but the kindest thing that you can do for someone who's lost is to let them walk their own path, not fund their confusion while you lose yourself. Her growth depends on facing discomfort, not avoiding it. Another commenter wrote, stay for the kids until she figures it out. Divorce will hurt them. But dishonesty hurts longer. Children recover from change faster than they recover from tension. You can co-parent in separate homes and still raise secure, loved kids. But you can't model emotional safety in a house full of silent pain. Another commenter wrote, she'll regret this one day. Maybe she will, but that's not your responsibility to wait for. You can love someone deeply and still know that staying will destroy both of you. Sometimes self-respect is the loudest I love you that you can give. So here's the takeaway. You're not broken for wanting to stay. You're human clinging on to the last place that still feels like home. But home isn't just walls and shared bills. Home is where you're emotionally welcomed. And if that space doesn't exist anymore, then it's time to build a new one, even if it's smaller, even if it's quieter, but it's yours. Leaving doesn't mean you stopped loving her. It means you finally started loving you too. So we've talked about love that ends but refuses to leave the house. But what about the kind of partnership where the imbalance isn't just emotional distance? It's control, where everyday chores come with a price tag. And that right there is where we're going next. Because the next story is about what happens when money turns into manipulation and when intimacy becomes a transaction. So let's jump into that next Reddit story. Husband, 44-year-old male, has me, 35-year-old female, pay for everyday task. Hello, first time posting, so be gentle. My 31-year-old female husband, 44-year-old male, is a good man, but whenever he does the dishes, folds the laundry, or goes to the store, he says I have to pay for that with sexual favors, i.e. BJ's, sex in general. If I don't, he gets pouty and sulks for a bit. Example, today we were attending our nephew's birthday party and we needed to get a gift. I was more than willing to go to the store, but my husband said, I'll go get it, no worries. So he goes and comes back and tells me, now you got to pay up, while grabbing himself. That isn't normal, right? I know I'm probably not making things better by just doing it because he gets all bent out of shape if I don't. And I do it to shut him up. It's not like we don't do sexual things normally. Like this isn't the only time he gets some. But I'm tired of him using this as a tactic to just perform basic functions around the house or tasks needed to be done anyway. I'm beginning to think this is borderline abuse, sad face. And then the poster went on to kind of post an update. I appreciate all the comments and advice. I'm going to clarify a few things. Note, I'm not defending or condoning his behavior. 1, I should have been more specific. This does not happen every time he does a task or a chore. It does happen pretty regularly, but I definitely do not help the situation by giving in. 2, this is not a turn on, in all caps. To be honest, I'm not really attracted to his advanced tactics usually. When we first started dating / got married, yes, I was attracted to him, but it has gone down in recent years. 3, I recognize this now as coercion. So I will be having a long chat with him. However, he doesn't respond very well to criticism. I'm not stupid, people. I just didn't know how to handle this, and I appreciate all the comments and messages reaching out. I have been becoming more confident and vocal about what I want and expect from him. Granted, it usually turns into a fight because he claims I'm being selfish and dramatic. Gaslighting, I know. I'm working on a plan. I'm not in the best place financially. We keep our finances separate. So I want to make sure I have that figured out before I get me and my son out. I do know I'm being gaslit. He doesn't seem to think so. Can someone gaslight you without realizing it? Anyway, I appreciate all of you. Please ask anything. I want to be confident in myself and my decisions. Smiley face. So it sounds like at first she went along with it to keep the peace, but lately she's tired and she realized that it's not playfulness, it's coercion. So she wrote, "This isn't normal, right?" ? She's beginning to see that it's an emotional and sexual manipulation, but she's scared to name that out loud. And that right there is what we're unpacking. And I want to start out by saying to her, girl, no, just no. This is not flirty. This is not a joke. That's a transaction you never agreed to. He's turning basic adult responsibilities into a barter system for your body. Like doing the dishes somehow earns him access to you. That's a hard no. That's not a partnership. That's entitlement with a smile. You know that moment when someone grabs you playfully, but you freeze inside? When you laugh it off because it's easier than arguing? That's not consent. That's conditioning. He's teaching you that peace only exists if you perform. That love is a reward he hands out after you've paid. And the worst part, you've started to believe it. That if you say no, you're the problem. That maybe you're being dramatic for not wanting to be objectified by your own husband. But listen to me. The moment affection becomes a form of currency, intimacy dies. Because real desire is about choice, not obligation. And what's even more painful is that he's calling it love. He probably thinks he's being playful, that you're lucky that he still wants you. But wanting you and respecting you are not the same thing. And you're not crazy for feeling uncomfortable. Your body's telling you the truth that your brain's been trying to talk you out of. If someone needs to trade sex to feel appreciated, they're not looking for intimacy. They're looking for control. So you're asking, this isn't normal, right? And the answer is no, it's not normal. And you're not overreacting. Here's what's actually happening beneath this pattern. She's showing up a mix of fearful and anxious attachment. Somewhere in her story, she learned that peace is earned through pleasing. Maybe growing up meant keeping people happy so they wouldn't explode or leave. So now, when he demands sex for housework, she defaults it to appeasement. Not because she wants to, but because she feels unsafe if she doesn't. And that's where it comes in when she says she just does it to shut him up. That's not a low libido problem. That's a boundary problem created by coercion. And for him, he might be carrying avoidance and entitlement patterns. For him, acts of service equal value. So if he washes the dishes, he expects a return on investment. And that's transactional thinking, not relational intimacy. And that can be rooted in insecurity and control. Instead of seeking connection through vulnerability, he seeks power through compliance. He's telling himself that sex proves that he's desired. But what he's actually proving is that he can take what he wants when he wants it. And some men tie self-worth to dominance because that's how they were taught to measure manhood. Provide, perform, possess. When they feel emotionally irrelevant or unseen, they use sex to reclaim importance. But when intimacy becomes proof instead of connection, the bedroom turns into a scoreboard. And what she's experiencing is a coercive control. It often starts as jokes or playful deals, then it slowly redefines consent. She's conditioned to equate compliance with calm. That dynamic can cause chronic anxiety, it can cause hypervigilance, and it can cause shame. Every no can then feel dangerous, and every yes can then feel dirty. And over time, this kind of pressure erodes self-esteem and body autonomy. She'll start disassociating during sex just to get through it. which then creates trauma responses in her nervous system. So no, you're not crazy. And yes, this is a form of abuse. You don't have to wait for bruises to call something harmful, because emotional and sexual coercion counts too. Healthy relationships have space for desire and boundaries at the same time. If someone truly loves you, they want your enthusiastic yes, not your obligated one. And when intimacy becomes a transaction, trust starts to die, because trust depends on freedom, the freedom to say no without fear of punishment. And here's the truth a lot of people don't want to face. Coercion isn't about sex. It's about power. He's not asking for connection. He's asserting control. And until that dynamic changes, no amount of apology or affection will make this safe. So what can she do next? She can reclaim agency in small steps, seek individual therapy, build financial safety, name what's happening out loud to someone that she trusts, because healing starts the moment that you stop calling it normal. And this right here, this is not normal. Let's see what the Reddit commenters had to say. One commenter said, "Girl, that's not kinky, that's creepy." Exactly. Because kink requires consent and mutual enjoyment. This isn't a shared fantasy, it's a one-sided demand. He's weaponizing chores to maintain power. Let's see what other commenters had to say. "He's just joking around. You're too sensitive." When the joke only makes one person laugh and the other person feel unsafe, then it's not a joke anymore. It's testing your boundaries to see what you'll tolerate. Let's take a look at another comment. "My husband flirts like that too. It's just his love language." Love languages do not cancel consent. Flirting is mutual when both people smile. If one person shrinks back, then it's not flirting, it's pressure. Another commenter wrote, "You should be grateful that he still wants you." No. Desire without respect is not a compliment. You deserve desire that's curious and gentle, not conditional and transactional. Another commenter wrote, "Maybe he's just bad at showing appreciation." Then he can learn, because healthy men, they are teachable, but you don't owe your body as tuition for his emotional education. And if you've been listening to this and thinking this feels too familiar, I want you to know that you're not crazy and you're not alone, because you can still love someone and acknowledge that their behavior crosses lines. You can set boundaries and still have compassion. Both things can exist at once, because real intimacy isn't about owning, it's about offering. And you deserve a relationship where no is heard as a complete sentence, not as a negotiation. Love doesn't need a payment plan. So that was about a partner who used sex as a currency. But what about when the currency is moral values? When money decisions start to expose the kind of person you really are? Because our next story is one of those moments that split a relationship right down the middle, when compassion and control collide. Let's talk about the fiance who used their shared money to save his dog's life, and the partner who called it a betrayal. So let's jump into that Reddit story. "My fiance isn't speaking to me after I used our money to help my dog, not sure how to fix it. My dog, German Shepherd, began acting strangely a few months ago. First couple of vet's visits didn't show anything until eventually we felt a large lump under his fur, which was later identified as a tumor. It was confirmed to be malignant and required surgery to remove it completely. The vet and I spoke and said it would likely cost over $5,000 to remove it completely, and there's no guarantee it will be a success. I don't know why the cost was so high, but it didn't matter to me. My dog is my dog, and there is no question in my mind that paying for the surgery was the right thing to do. I paid for the surgery out of my own savings. This is important. My fiance and I have separate finances, and my savings are easily 5 times what she had saved up. When she found out how much the surgery cost, she went ballistic that I paid for the surgery without asking her when we were planning a wedding. She says that we will have to downsize our wedding to compensate, and that my dog is already so old, he's 10, and the money wouldn't go far. I can't even comprehend how she could say that to me. I honestly can't empathize with her here. which has caused a massive rip in a previously amazing relationship. My dog is my dog, and he's a member of the family. I refuse to put a few $1,000s over his well-being. My fiance is acting as though I'm being selfish and that our wedding should come first since we're starting a family. She hasn't talked to me since, other than to tell me to take out the garbage, clean the dishes, etc. If I try to engage in conversation, she will shut down or walk away. She refuses to talk over this unless I get on my knees, grovel, and apologize. I can't bring myself to do this as a matter of principle and self-respect. So my question for people here is, how am I supposed to get her to talk to me and to patch things up? I don't want to throw away the relationship, but at the same time, I feel like this isn't something I can compromise on. So what he's asking is how do I fix this? And should I even apologize? So let's talk about it. Okay, so this one is complicated, but first, that dog, that's family. $5,000 is a lot of money, yes, but grief is priceless. He wasn't being impulsive, he was being loyal. She's looking at the spreadsheet and he's looking at the heartbeat. Two very different value systems just crashed into each other. And you can almost feel them both, right? She's anxious about money, about wedding costs, and about the future. And he's terrified of losing his best friend and doing nothing about it. But here's the thing, love reveals itself in crisis. And the moment she said, "You should have asked me," she turned a moral decision into a management meeting. You know that feeling when someone takes your most emotional moment and critiques it like it's a budget line? It's like being punched with logic when all you needed was empathy. He wasn't asking for permission. He was acting on principle. And now he's being punished for having a heart. At the same time, let's be fair, weddings are stressful. Money brings out insecurity. She's probably scared of debt, of loss of control, of things not going as planned. But fear, it doesn't justify cruelty. There's a way to say, "I wish we would have talked first," without making someone feel like saving a life was selfish. So no, he's not wrong for saving his dog. But this moment exposed something much bigger. They don't share the same moral compass when it comes to compassion versus control. So he's asking, how do I fix this? Should I apologize? Let's start with the simplest truth first. You don't apologize for saving a life. You can apologize for not communicating sooner, but not for acting out of love. And this right here is one of those moments where intent and impact, they collide. He meant compassion and she felt betrayal. Neither is wrong for feeling what they feel, but how they handled that difference will define the entire marriage. And what he shows is secure learning, but protective traits. His dog is a symbol of loyalty and unconditional love. Maybe the one place he always felt safe. And when the dog was in danger, his nervous system went straight into caregiver mode. Protect, fix, save. That's healthy instinct. But it also means he leads with responsibility when he feels vulnerable. He's a type who handles pain through action. And now that he's being criticized for that action, he feels shamed for his own integrity. And underneath that anger and confusion is hurt. If she can't understand why I did this, does she even see who I am? And she leans more into an anxious avoidant with control coping. To her, money equals safety. When things feel uncertain, she tightens her grip on what she can measure. So when he spent $5,000 without consulting her, it didn't just feel financial, it felt existential. Her nervous system read it as, "I don't matter in your decisions." And that's why her reaction was so big. It wasn't about the dog, it was about control and security. But instead of expressing fear, she expressed anger, because anger feels safer than vulnerability. And when people equate stability with control, empathy can start to feel like a threat. Your act of kindness forces them to face how rigid they've become. So they double down on the rules to avoid feeling powerless. In other words, she's not mad about the dog. She's terrified of the feeling that life can change without her permission. And this dynamic right here shows signs of emotional immaturity and possibly anxiety disorder patterns. Her shutdown and demand for groveling suggests that she uses withdrawal as punishment. And that's not communication. That's control through silence. And for him, continued exposure to that dynamic breeds self-doubt. He'll start apologizing for having values, for feeling deeply, for being empathetic. And that's how people slowly lose themselves in peacekeeping. So to answer his question directly, no, you shouldn't apologize for what you did. You can say, I wish I had looped you in so we could have talked about how it affects our budget, but you don't have to apologize for choosing compassion. And the goal isn't to convince her to love your choice. It's to invite a conversation about what shared values mean. And you could try asking her, if one of our kids needed urgent care and it costs the same, would you want me to ask you first? Because how she answers that will tell you everything about her capacity for empathy. And love without shared values feels like a constant translation. You're both speaking different languages and arguing over grammar instead of meaning. And financial conflicts aren't always just about numbers. They expose how we define love. For some people, love is measured by control, and for others, it's measured in care. And neither of them is wrong for how you feel, but you can't build a marriage where one person's safety requires the other to suppress compassion. And if she can't respect the heart that led you to save your dog, it's not the money that you need to worry about. It's the lack of emotional alignment. Because in healthy relationships, both partners feel safe to care deeply without fear of punishment. And the Reddit commenters, they were kind of split on this one. And I mean really split. So half were ready to pack her bags for her, and the other half were like, you should have discussed it. Let's unpack a few of these takes on these comments. One stated, he's impulsive. Marriage means shared decision. And that's true. Communication matters, but let's not pretend that he emptied their joint account. He used his savings for an emergency, and emergencies rarely come with a meeting agenda. The deeper question is, why does partnership mean permission to her, but trust to him? Let's turn to another comment. If she loved him, she'd understand. Love doesn't always equal emotional maturity. Some people love deeply, but still struggle with empathy when fear kicks in. This isn't just a love issue. It's a regulation issue. Let's turn to another comment. She's a monster for choosing a wedding over a life. Let's ease up a little bit on that one. She's not evil, she just seems scared. But fear that refuses to listen becomes cruelty. So yes, she is wrong for how she expressed it, but the solution isn't shaming, it's accountability. Let's turn to another comment. He should grovel to keep the peace? No, because peace that requires self-betrayal isn't peace, it's submission. Apologies are for impact, not integrity. If you start apologizing for having a moral compass, then you'll lose your ability to navigate your own life. Let's turn to one more comment. They're just not compatible. That might be true. Compatibility isn't about liking the same music or food. It's about reacting to crisis the same way. When one person seeks connection and the other one seeks control, then the relationship starts tearing from opposite ends. And what this story really shows is how money decisions reveal emotional maturity. In moments of stress, our nervous system speaks louder than our words. He acted from love, and she acted from fear. And if they don't learn how to hear each other's nervous systems instead of just their logic, then they'll keep fighting the same battle, different topic, same wound. So no, don't apologize for saving your dog. Apologize only if you want to rebuild communication. Then decide whether her response is a red flag or a wake-up call for a deeper conversation before you walk down the aisle. Because marriage doesn't change someone's empathy level, it magnifies it. You deserve a partner who sees your compassion as strength, not as an inconvenience. We just saw what happens when compassion gets punished, when someone's heart becomes the problem. But now let's talk about a different kind of punishment, the kind that hides behind logic and family protection. Because this next story, it's about love being negotiated like a liability. So let's jump into that Reddit story. Fiance, 30-year-old male, suggesting prenup to withhold alimony from me, 28-year-old female, if we got divorced down the line. Our wedding is in 5 weeks and I don't know what to do. It sounds like a good one. I've been his support system through his entire 4 years of residency. Not financially. We both took care of ourselves financially as he is an LOC and we both have salaried jobs. We've lived off a tight budget and he took me out on very few dates due to the debt that he is in. I've done all of the cleaning, the cooking, taking care of him and our dog while working full-time since we moved in a year and a half ago, but did a significant amount for the 2 years prior to moving in. Not that I'm keeping count. It's just the reality of our relationship has been 80% effort from me and 20% effort from him for 4 years. And I knew that would be the case going in, given his work schedule right now. We agreed not to get a prenup 3 years ago since he has no sustainable assets. We agreed that once I get pregnant in 2 or 3 years, I would likely quit my job and become a stay-at-home mom. His parents, who have been actively destroying our relationship since we moved in together, we've gone to therapy for this, told my fiance 6 weeks before our wedding that they are withholding their wedding contribution, which is half our wedding budget, unless he gets a prenup against me so I don't get alimony if we divorce down the line. Given the vulnerable position I'd be in as a stay-at-home mom without a career anymore, I feel really hurt and betrayed by the idea of this. There are reasonable laws in place for alimony without a prenup given several circumstances. So think of the possibility that he could leave me high and dry with a newborn baby, no job, debt still in our name, and zero alimony to help me get back on my feet in 3 years right now. I feel like he isn't looking to protect me at all. It seems like a very selfish move. We never had financial insecurities and always made it work for 4 years. Never spoke of divorce or prenups. Now I hear it every day from him because he's being a realist. I get it, but the circumstances of this prenup seem very alarming to me. What are your thoughts on this? Note, it's a long history with the in-laws, but when I confronted them in the recent weeks to ask why they dislike me, / what I can do to apologize, / how I can make things better, they have nothing other than using therapist-approved boundaries I've created against me / us. Like not wanting my MIL coming over because she told me and my fiance to get the fuck out of her house when he defended me for wanting silk flowers as my bouquet. She half apologized for this 3 weeks ago, but then the drama with her only spiraled. So I don't know how my fiance expects me to welcome her / his dad / his bully sister into our home in the midst of all them destroying our future. Yep, one of his sisters is part of the in-law issues. My fiance did consistently defend me during the hour-and-a-half confrontational discussion, but then wedding invites were sent out shortly after. The family caused an uproar. We were faced with prenup ultimatum. He said we don't need their money. Then 2 days later, he was in favor of getting a prenup, so I couldn't rinse him of his money down the road. Again, we were always relatively on the same page with financial and future plans. My fiance seems to continue wanting me to forgive his family and to move on neutrally with them while he maintains his normal, lower contact relationship with them. And I just wouldn't come around family functions as often. I've forgiven them, either with a "I'm sorry, but ... or no apology at all. Several times, and they only seem to get worse towards me and our relationship. But my fiance wants to stay relatively in denial in this reality. His mom is terminally ill, so I understand why it's a challenging position for him to be in. But by him not standing by me and defending me / not allowing his parents and sister to negatively impact our relationship / wanting to continue casually spending time with them in the midst of the lead up to what's supposed to be our wedding, it only creates raising feelings of betrayal and resentment. Another note, our therapist mentioned my fiance seems to come from an enmeshed family dynamic. I'm sure many of you probably guessed it though. One more note. My fiance saw this post and told me I'm withholding a fact that needs to be shared. He wants me to mention that he would split everything accumulated between the two of us while married 50-50. I figured that was given in any marriage with or without a prenup. And given the fact that he has 2 fellowships after this year that needs another 2 years to pay off his debt, there won't be any actual accumulations for another 5 years anyway. This leads me to feel like his family will continue harassing me full force for the next 5 years to continue to try to bully me out. New update. My fiance agreed no prenup, told his mom off, and enrolled in counseling for him / us. I made the decision to postpone the wedding and take the financial hit given it was 4 weeks away. I know the lead up to the weddings aren't always rainbows and butterfly, but I also know it's not supposed to be this hard / sad. Any new advice giving this update is very much encouraged and appreciate. And this one right here kind of makes my blood pressure rise a little bit. Let's just say it plain. You stood by him through the grind. You loved him when he was tired, broke, barely present. You built that foundation he's standing on, and the moment that the house is finished, his parents hand him a blueprint to keep you out of it, and then somehow you're the risk? No. That's not protection, that's projection. His parents aren't protecting him from you. They're protecting their fantasy of control. You know that feeling when someone treats your loyalty like a liability? When every meal you cooked, when every late night you comforted him through gets rewritten as, well, that was your choice. That's not love, that's gaslighting with fine print. And let's be clear, you're not asking for a blank check. You're asking for fairness. If you step out of your job to raise kids, if you pause your career for the family, you deserve to know that you won't be left rebuilding from nothing if things were ever to fall apart. And that right there is not greed, it's equity. And the part that really burns is that he agreed years ago that there would be no prenup. Then 5 weeks before the wedding, he flips because his parents threatened to pull their money. That's not a partner, that's a son still asking for permission. And that is the real red flag here. The prenup is just a symptom. The disease is the enmeshment. You can't build a marriage on boundaries that collapse every time his mother frowns. So when you postponed the wedding, that wasn't fear, that was strength. And what you said right there was, I'd rather lose the money than lose myself. And that's the kind of self-respect that builds real love, even if it means that you have to rebuild it without him. All right, let's take a deep breath and look at what's really happening underneath this dynamic. Because this isn't just about a legal document. It's about power and trust and who gets to decide what safety means in this relationship. A prenup in itself isn't toxic. Plenty of healthy couples have one. But why it's introduced, when it's introduced, and how it's enforced, that reveals the emotional truth underneath. What she's showing is earned, secure energy that's been shaken. She's done the work, she's patient, she's empathetic, she's self-aware. But she's also tired of being tested. Her core wound is betrayal through minimization. Every time she voices hurt, he frames it as drama. Every time she asks for partnership, he interprets it as a threat. So she starts questioning her sanity. Am I overreacting? Maybe this really is just business. That self-doubt is the exact emotional erosion that controlling families count on. And it does sound like that he's caught in an enmeshment with his parental control. He's still the golden child, trying to keep everyone happy. His fiance, his parents, his image. But when parents say protect yourself, what they really mean is protect us from her influence. He's torn between belonging and being an individual. But here's the hard truth. Until he learns to tolerate disappointing his parents, he'll keep disappointing his partner instead. And this right here is generational anxiety disguised as tradition. Parents who equate money with morality, who believe control equals care, they probably saw marriages fail and thought, if we just control the contract, then we can prevent the pain. But fear dressed up as protection is still fear. And it still poisons every relationship that it touches. And what they're really saying is that we don't trust your judgment, so we'll decide who is safe to love. And for her, this situation creates relationship trauma because the betrayal didn't come from an argument. It came from collusion. She wasn't fighting for him. She was fighting an entire system that dismissed her reality. That's gaslighting by committee. It triggers hypervigilance, rumination, and eventually emotional withdrawal. And for him, there's unresolved family of origin enmeshment. He never learned to separate guilt from love. He mistakes compliance for loyalty. And that's why every boundary feels like rebellion instead of growth. So she doesn't need to fix this. He does. Her only job right now is to keep listening to the part of her that said, something about this feels wrong. And she was right. If he wanted partnership, he would have fought to protect the bond, not the bank account. And yes, postponing the wedding was the healthiest choice she could have made. Because love that's pressured into signing for security isn't love. It's liability management with a dress code. He needs to go to therapy alone and learn to separate his parents' anxiety from his own identity before he ever asks her to step back down the aisle. And here's the core truth. Marriage is supposed to merge lives, not divide them by legal clauses written in fear. When one partner's parents hold financial power and that partner allows them to weaponize it, you're no longer building a union. You're maintaining a hierarchy. Because love can't thrive under supervision. And the moment that you need permission to trust each other, you've already lost the foundation of the relationship. So no, she's not being dramatic. She's being clear. And clarity is the beginning of freedom. And Reddit commenters had opinions and they were loud. Some of them sided with hers, others sided with it's just business. Let's walk through a few of them together. One commenter said, prenups are normal. She's overreacting. Prenups can be normal when they're created together early with mutual benefit. What's not normal is dropping one 5 weeks before the wedding under threat of losing funding. That's not a contract, that's coercion. Another commenter wrote, if she really loved him, she would sign it to prove she's not after his money. Love that has to be proven by forfeiting protection isn't love. It's a loyalty test. And loyalty tests only serve the people who already plan to fail them. A third commenter wrote, he's just doing what any smart man would do. Smart doesn't mean scared. Wisdom would have been saying, Mom, Dad, I appreciate your concern, but I trust the woman that I chose. That's emotional adulthood. What he did was emotional outsourcing. Another commenter wrote, she's being selfish for making it about feelings. Feelings are the relationship. If the emotional foundation crumbles, the legal paperwork won't save you. Another commenter wrote, at least he came around in the end. That's true, and that does matter. He did take accountability, he told his mother off, and he chose counseling. But repair only works if the pattern changes, not just the apology. If she has to keep postponing her safety every time someone else panics, then the wedding may happen, but the partnership won't. And this story isn't about a prenup. It's about who you become when money and family test your backbone. She showed strength by pausing instead of performing. She said, my peace is worth more than your approval. And that is emotional wealth. Because here's the truth. Security built on fear isn't stability, it's surveillance. And the kind of love that survives life's chaos is the one that can survive honesty without turning into punishment. So no, she wasn't being dramatic. She was practicing discernment. And discernment is how we protect love that we deserve, not one that we settle for. So money isn't just numbers, it's language. It's how we say, I've got you, or I can't keep doing this alone. And every one of these stories, from the partner who stopped working to the one fighting over a prenup, reminds us that financial imbalance is almost never about money itself. It's about safety, it's about power, it's about worth, and it's about whether love still feels like teamwork when life gets uncomfortable. Because money doesn't create the cracks, it just makes them visible. And when you finally stop arguing about who paid what, you start seeing what's really costing you your peace, your self-respect, and your sense of partnership. And if you saw yourself in any of these stories, it doesn't mean that you're broken. It means that you're human, learning how to balance care with clarity, generosity, and with boundaries, and love with accountability. Because at the end of the day, the healthiest relationships aren't built on who earns more. They're built on the one who shows up, even when it's uncomfortable to talk about what's fair. So there you have it. You clearly love a little emotional chaos, so stay with me a little. Hit subscribe, grab your tea, and let's keep unpacking the wildest, realest stories about love, money, and everything in between. I'll catch you on the next video.